Well, welcome back. Today we're coming from the Aegean Coast in Turkey. It's a location I come to about once a year. I have a home here, and one of the problems with coming back to locations you've been to is that sometimes you've photographed all things that inspired you, so it can be a little bit difficult to find new things. But today, what I've done is there's a little building out in the bay, which I'll try and video for you if I can. I'm only using my iPhone, and it's used to launch jet skis. Now, it's been very, very hot here the last few days, and therefore there's quite a lot of dust and stuff in the air, but that's quite good because it's going to help add a little bit of depth to the picture. So what I want to do, by using a long lens, is going to compress the scene slightly, and we're going to drag in the background, which is a set of mountains, and bring those closer in to the foreground. Now, to do that, to get a nice clean composition, I'm going to have to take several images, I think, and composite them together. It's going to be easier for me to show you that in post-production than try and video here on location, because I'm only using my iPhone. So I will do as much video as I can, and then maybe in post-production I'll take you through all the settings that I used and show you how I'm going to put this image together. So we're just waiting for the light to drop. We're getting this lovely golden glow in the mountains in the background. The foreground is in shadow a little bit, but that's not a problem. But we're just waiting for the light just to drop that little bit more and get a little bit more saturation in it. As the light drops, it tends to get more saturated the sky to a point, and then it will suddenly go very mucky. So we want to avoid that. So timing is quite important on this shot, but it's looking very, very beautiful at the moment. So we'll start shooting probably a little bit before I think we need to make sure that we get all those lovely tones. What does tend to happen in this part of the world is the light tends to drop all of a sudden with very little warning, so you have to keep your eye and wits about you. Mahaba, as they say in Turkey, or hello and welcome back to this video tutorial. I'm going to go over, first of all, with this, some of the settings and the reasons why I shot the particular image the way I did. It's quite unusual. With the video footage, I didn't have my HD video camera with me. I only took my iPhone, which is always a little bit tricky, trying to do video and photograph and present all at the same time. So I didn't really get as much footage as I would like. So I'm going to start off today by touching upon the location, the images I shot, and why I shot it in the way I did. Now, as I mentioned in the video, this is a place I've been to many, many times, this part of Turkey, and especially this particular beach. And so when you go to somewhere new, everything's inspiring. There's things you spot, but when you've been to a place more than once, as I have here, it can be a little bit harder to find new things to shoot. So that was the kind of first challenge I had. But while I was there, I'd been to the beach a bit earlier, and I was watching the light go down. I was photographing these lads who you saw in the video jumping off the pier. I was watching the light in the background on the mountains, and I saw this hut which is used for jet skis. They launched jet skis from it, and I thought it was could make quite a nice picture. But this area is quite cluttered. There's a pier on the one side, as you see in this picture, and there's other boats in the bay there. And so one of the reasons I used, there's several reasons. The first reason I used a slightly long lens is because the building there in the bay is quite a way out, and a wide-angle lens or a 28 to 70mm lens, which is my usual lens I use for a lot of my work, would just not be long enough. So that's the first reason. The second reason was with a longer lens, it compresses objects in the frame. With a wide angle, the distances between each object is perceived to be a lot more, and with longer lenses, it's opposite. It compresses the scene, so the distance between objects in the scene, for instance, the hut and the mountains, is compressed, so it brings them further forward. So that's one of the reasons two of the reasons I used this particular lens. The trouble with that is you then create an image which is obviously very compressed and not very wide, and obviously I wanted to get a little bit more of a kind of a landscape feel to this picture. So the way around that is to take several different images, which I'm going to show you in a minute, and we're going to stitch them all together to create a single file. Now this also increases the resolution, so if you're using this quite a small resolution camera, this is going to one way of increasing the resolution, but of course you will need quite a lot of computer power with some of these pictures to be able to process them and work on them. So that's the reason why I shot the image the way I did, and now I'm going to show you the frames that I shot. So most of these were all shot on 200mm except for one set, which I'll show you in a second. So I basically set the camera up as if I was shooting a panoramic, but in landscape, as you can see here. And this is my background image. So this image is what I'm using for the mountains and the bit of cliff here and the water, and possibly for the hut. But I have got another image of the hut which I may use instead, but I'm going to see what happens as we go through this image. So for this is my main background image. These two will be stitched together, which we'll go through in a bit, and I'm using that, as I said, mainly for the mountains and a bit of the sea. The second lot of images I shot were a bit more foreground. I wanted a bit more foreground water, so basically all I did was just stayed on 200mm, tipped the camera down slightly and shot some foreground water. We're going to have to do a bit of cleaning up here with some of this water. When you shoot panoramics, generally these days they're very, very good. The software will do a good job of stitching stuff together, except when you get water, you are going to get missed lines, so we'll have to do a little bit of retouching. So that basically is going to add a little bit more height to my image, so I'm going to be adding some resolution to the bottom here. Don't worry, it will come a lot clearer as we go on. The next lot I did is to add a little bit more sky. Not so much to extend the sky, but I just wanted to darken the sky down a little bit and bring out those lovely colours. So what I should probably do in this image, on these frames here, I should probably strip out the sky and probably slip this one in behind just to add colour. So these four, 1, 2, 3, 4, are adding more resolution and extending the canvas. Again, don't worry about it, I'll explain it more as we go along. The other thing I did was I did shoot some other little bit of elements. I've got this boat here, which we may use, or a variation of it. I may well add, again, I'm not totally convinced yet, but I may well add this boat as a silhouette in the foreground, again adding a bit more depth to the picture. We've then got this boat. You won't see on very well on this frame, but there's another frame here. I was shooting this lovely yacht came across the front of the mountains here, and another boat. I may well use one or two of these. Okay, and finally this image here, I may well use. Let me just zoom in a little bit. I may well use the frame of the actual hut of this image if I want to, just enlarge it slightly, or I may use the existing one. I don't know, but these are all extra elements I shot. So that's all the pictures we have to work with, and now we're going to take you through the processing of them, and then obviously we'll start to go into Photoshop and start stitching them together. Before we move on, I nearly forgot to mention the camera settings. Now, I set the camera on a tripod, and this is obviously a great idea for doing panoramics. You don't have to. The stitching software is very good, but if you can help it along by putting it on a tripod, it will help. So the exposure is around 100th of a second f11, and I use that exposure on virtually every image Okay, I didn't move the aperture. I manually focused the camera, and I focused on the building in the middle of the bay. And when I moved the camera down for the foreground, I didn't refocus. I kept the focus the same on the same spot because I don't want it anything too sharp in the foreground. It would have changed the dynamics of the picture. So I kept the focus the same and just moved the camera down. The same with some of the boat shots. I did some with the boat shot, but the last ones I did, I actually kept the focus again on the same spot here. So the boat is naturally slightly out of focus, which again is what we want in the picture. We want it to look fairly natural. Don't want it sharp from front to back. So there's a few tips on that. So tripod, manual exposure, manual focus, and again, I didn't change the focus for the other elements. I kept the same focus point throughout the image, so we get a much more natural feel to the picture. Right, so we're back in Lightroom now. I've got the raw files open in front of me. I'm not going to go through every setting here because it's just no point. There's lots of videos you've probably already watched on those. But what I'm going to give you just my kind of take on processing these images for the technique we're using, which is for stitching. What we need to think of when we're going to put these images together, they obviously, it goes without saying, they need to kind of match in density, color, and stuff like that. There's no point having one that's slightly warmer, maybe on this one, on this side, and then the next frame maybe is slightly cooler, because when you come to stitch them, it's going to be very noticeable. So we've got to treat these as single files. We're going to do a couple at a time. So my tip here is think about these. Let me just turn some of these off. Turn these elements off. When we process these, not so much the sky, because the sky I've shot really just to retain the colour, and that can go slightly warmer if we need to. But certainly these files, which is my main background picture for the mountains and water, and these foreground pictures, certainly the water to a certain degree needs to kind of blend in quite nicely. So when we go in and develop these, I would just advise to get one image right, okay, for density and color, and then make sure that you go in and you get the development settings up and copy settings, and make sure that you don't need to tick all these, but certainly the white balance you will need to keep the same. Maybe the exposure for the two frames needs to match, and certainly some of the other ones that if you've done any major adjustments on, they need to match between this frame and the next one. Okay, you can see I've already done that one. I'm not going to mess around with it. These two match quite nicely. When it comes to the water, okay, obviously there's different exposures, so you need to sort of go in and eyeball that and try and blend it in the best you can to match the previous pictures. Obviously the water is slightly different in the foreground, but make sure the colour balance and that is similar, and it will avoid any major headaches when they come to stitch it. So not only do you need to, in summary, not only do you need to make sure that the two images you're stitching side by side matches, which goes without saying, but you also need to think a little bit about these other two, which are going to go on the bottom of our image when we finish it. Okay, they need to be fairly close. Right, so once you've processed your pictures and they're all nice, there's a bit of continuity between each frame, the ones that have got to obviously be blended together. We then just need to output these and open them in Photoshop. You can in some versions. I'm using Lightroom 3 and Photoshop CS3. They don't always work tandem together. If you're more up to date, then they will, and you can probably just go in here, Photo, Edit in, and you can output and merge these into a panoramic straight from Lightroom. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to output these and export them as TIFF files, and then open them in Photoshop, and then merge them together. So that's the next stage of this tutorial. Right, so I've now put my raw files into TIFFs, and I'm now in Photoshop CS3, the bridge. I'm just going to simply select our main background image, go to Tools, Photoshop, and then Photo Merge, and that should open up this dialog box. I'm going to leave the layout to auto, I've got my files loaded there, and I'm going to tick blend images together and click OK. And this should produce a panoramic with a few problems, because I said there's going to be movement in the sea, so I'll need to go in and retouch that. But it's going to be a good basis of for the background image. Now, if you don't have some photo immersion software, and I'm sure there's even free stuff on the web these days, then you can do this manually. A little bit more work, but it can be done. So don't get put off if you haven't got the software. Right, I'm now in Photoshop, and our panoramic has been created for us, and it's done a very good job actually. If I just undo this layer, you can see where the join goes, and what we'll do, we'll go along this join, and I generally just go along it and just check for any errors. And at the moment, it looks like it's not done a bad job at all. Normally you'll find problems in the water, and there's probably one little bit up here, but to be honest with you, it's minimal. So yeah, very pleased with that. Yeah, very good. So very little to be done on this one. So now we've got kind of the basis of our background. I probably don't want this. Don't worry about the foreground here. We're going to add our water, our foreground water, to this image. But there is going to be a few bits of research that needs doing to take out this flagpole probably, and this bit of decking that is here. But for the main part, I'm pretty pleased with this. We're going to take out this sky. We're going to leave the cliffs in, these mountains in, and this part, and probably leave the jetty in this one. May change my mind about that, and may well use the other one depending on how it looks. But so far, so good. So there's our start of our background. We can now go in and we can reprocess these other elements, such as the foreground water, and add that in, and then we're going to move on to the sky. So let's do this one next, and we'll come back and I'll show you the next stage. Right, I've now processed my foreground water, as you'll see here, and you'll notice we have got a little bit of a problem here with the water, where it hasn't quite joined up, where the water's been moving, and more noticeable in the foreground. So it hasn't quite joined up. So that's not a major problem. Sometimes you can go in and you can just paint the mask and do a good job of just cleaning it up. Other times it's just easier to flatten it and to get the clone tool and just retouch it like that. That's what I'm going to do. Command and Control E. I'm going to flatten it and apply the mask like so. No messing around. Get the move tool, hold down the shift key if you like. That's out of habit more than anything. I'm just going to drop that onto our background layer. I'm going to have to transform this. This is our foreground water. Actually, I'm going to rename this with this one. Foreground water. So we know what it is. Command or Control, click on the layer to select it. Command or Control T to transform, and we're just going to have to reduce this water a little bit, because remember, we only wanted it really for the foreground. I don't want too much. We can also drag it down like this. Don't worry too much. Just bring it down. Just get it roughly as you think is correct. I think somewhere around there, and click enter. You can always go back and readjust it. And we can now hold down the Alter Option key and add a layer mask, which is going to hide the layer because I filled it with black. Holding down the Alter Option key will fill it with black, like so. We can now just very crudely get a brush tool with white. Remember, white reveals, black conceals. Paint with white will reveal the water in the foreground. And we're just going to do this like so. Again, just very roughly for the moment. Just bring that out. Okay. I'm not going to worry too much. We can go back in later and fine tune it. I just want to see roughly what we've got available to us at the moment. So that'll do for now. Just get a rough idea. We can come back in a little bit later and just clean this up. So what I've done now is I've just cleaned this mask up a little bit and just try and get the blending right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just flatten the background here to merge it. So Command and Control E. We're going to apply the layer mask because we don't really need two separate layers. And so we've got one solid background now, and then we've got the water on top. That's going to make it easier for me to start messing about and just really kind of get this really blended in correctly. We may need to replace and get rid of this pier here, so we may need to bring some more water in, but it's a bit of an organic process. You never quite know what you're going to need. Right, so I've taken a few moments out just to sort of look at the image and work out what I may or may not do going forward. Now, I'm almost definitely I'm going to crop this slightly. It's slightly too panoramic for what I want, but even so, I probably will crop it in from this side a little bit. I probably won't be cropping into this side, and I don't think really I want to keep this pier, so we're going to need to take that out. So let me show you how we might approach that, or how I approach it anyway, which I think is probably the best technique to use. So I'm just going to hide this water for a second. I'm going to select the background layer. I'm going to Command or Control J to duplicate it. Okay, and I'm going to just start making selections, very loose selections of some of these parts. So let's start with the tops of these umbrellas. I'll just zoom out a little bit. That's a bit too far in. That's about right. Okay, so we're just going to start by making a rough selection around here. I don't want to take too much at once, somewhere like that, and then going to drag that across. And don't worry at this stage about getting a perfect match or anything like that. Command or Control C to copy, Command or Control V to paste. We then get the Move tool, and we can just drag this over like so. As I said, it doesn't have to be very precise. We can go in and clean this up. I'm just trying to get something going where we can just patch this up very roughly to give us something to work on. Now I'm going to be taking this sky out, so I don't need to worry about that, but I do want to get a bit more of this hillside here to get the top of the flag, something like that. Let's just drag that across slightly. Let's try that bit up there. Command and Control C to copy, Command and Control V to paste, and again Move tool, and I'm just going to slot that in somewhere around there. Looks good. Again, we can always come back and clean this up. I'm just going to merge these two, so Command or Control E to merge down, and I can merge that down again to this background copy layer. So there's before, there's after. Doesn't look too good at the moment, but it's just patching it all in. I can then move down a bit further again, get the lasso tool, and I want to take a little bit of this. It's always good to have a little bit more selection than you need. Drag that across somewhere around there. Command or Control C to copy, Command or Control V to paste. Move tool, again move that over. Something like that looks pretty good. Command and Control E to merge that down. So as you can see, we start building it up bit by bit. I'm not going to take you through all this because it'd be a bit boring to watch. So we just build it up bit by bit, and then we can come in and we'll come in and clean this up in a minute. So I'll carry on with this and we'll come back to it in a little bit. Okay, so I've carried on cleaning up various areas, doing selections, copying and pasting. Done the same with these buoys in the water here. I get some donor ones from this side and clone across this side, and I got rid of the rest of this pier. Still need a bit of cleaning up to do, but I'll just show you how I've done the water. This is as far as I've got with the water. There's still a little bit here, a few little marks here. All I do is add an empty layer above the layer we want to work on. Get the clone stamp tool. With this fairly soft, maybe 10% hardness. Sample all layers is selected, and I literally just come in and Alt or Option click, and then just work along, just to try and get a more natural effect. If there is lines there, there's a few little bits here which I'm not happy with, and we just work around the image like so. Make sure you're pressing down fairly hard when you're cloning. You don't want to really go over areas too many times because it gets all mushy and soft, and it's a telltale sign, even on soft blurred water like this, that you've been kind of retouching and been messing about. So that's as far as I got. Then I can Control or Command E to flatten that like we did before, and then Voila. So now the difficult part with all these compositing is making sure the transitions are right. Now, that in my viewpoint here, I can still see the transitions aren't perfect. So still need a little bit of work to do on the foreground water there. That side doesn't look too bad, but a few little bits and pieces I'm not over happy with. So it still needs a little bit more work. Right, so I've carried on with the water transition, and all I did in the end was I just fine-tuned the mask. I'm just going to soften this a little bit, go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm just going to soften this edge somewhere around 40, maybe a bit more, maybe 56 odd pixels, like so. And that's just really just smoothed out these transitions, as I said, between the two bits of water, make it look a bit more natural. Might need to come back to it again a little bit, I don't know, but we'll move on and see where it takes us, and if we need to come back we will. Now we're running out of time a bit on this part of the tutorial, so I'm going to move ahead to the one last bit, which is to take the sky out of this image. So I'm going to highlight the background layer, the copy, not the original. And we're going to use the magic wand tool, or quick selection tool I should say, and I'm just going to drag it across the sky like so. Now the good thing about, so when you're doing composites like this, and any parts of the image that you're cloning in come from the same time and same place, it makes light work of the compositing, because you basically the colors should be very similar, etc. So when we come to clone in the sky here with the other one I shot, which is slightly darker, I shouldn't have too many problems with there being colour fringing around the mountains here, but we shall see. So let's just clean up that mask a little bit, and this is why I won't use things like magic wand or quick selection tools, although in some circumstances they work very well, and I think in this circumstance it will, as I said, because we're cloning in or dropping in a sky similar colour and density, there shouldn't be too many problems. So I'm just going to click on the mask here like so. In fact that's the wrong way around, so Command or Control I to invert it, and now we've dropped the sky out. So next thing we do, we can drag the sky in from our donor images, and here's that one. So let's open that up into Photoshop, and then we can drag that straight in. Get the move tool once it's opened up, and then just pull it in there, drop it down underneath the sky like so. Now we're going to have to reduce the size of this to make it fit. So Command and Control click on the layer to select it, Command and Control T to bring the transform tool into play, and we can just reduce the size of the sky because we want to see some of that lovely pinkish tinge to this as well. We're going to have to jiggle this around a little bit to make it fit. I've got to be careful we don't get the background elements showing through, which we have at the moment. So let me see if I can just adjust this. Now we're going to be cropping the edge of this image slightly, so I think that will just about do us. Something around there, like so. Okay, then click Enter to apply that. Command and Control D to deselect. So there's our new sky, like so. We can just move this around a little bit more just to make it fit a bit better. Okay, so there's before, and there's after the new sky. So just a nicer tone to it. And we still haven't made any adjustments to it yet. We can still boost the colour a little bit, make it a little bit richer, and maybe darken it down a bit more if we need to. So that's just dropping it straight in. So already that made a big difference. So we're going to leave it there. We've still got quite a bit more work to do, a little more cleaning up. We've got to obviously look at adding the foreground elements of the boat in, if we decide to do that, which I think we probably will at least try and have a look. And then we're going to go in and see if we need to add a new building in the bay there. Do we take this guy out? I don't know. There's another little boat we can put in. So there's quite a few little bit more bits and pieces we can do. But the main elements are now in place. The one thing I will just do before we go is just check the edges of the mountains. And as I said, because we're dropped in a sky from the same scene, although it was a little bit darker, we shouldn't have any problems with any of the colours, any colour fringing or so forth. So for now, let's leave it there, and in the next episode we're going to finish this image off and start to make it really sing with some contrast adjustments and colour adjustments. Thanks for watching. Catch you in part 2.